If you're wondering whether you have the qualities to become a programmer, let me tell you my personal story on what I think helped me get into the programming, but also what kept me in it. Maybe you can recognize yourself in it. I remember in school, in programming class, we learned about matrices and numbers and sorting those numbers in matrices, and I guarantee you that as a 16 years old teenager, sorting matrices was not my first priority. Especially because I've never ever seen a matrix of numbers in real life, nor had I had a reason to sort it. That is why I try to have a real applicable examples in my own courses and tutorials, and not sorting of matrices. And a lot of people think that math is important in programming, but I was never good at math. I was doing good in school, but I hardly passed my math exams, to be honest. I never liked math. So back then I never looked at programming as anything useful, really. I did make some dumb programs on my first Amiga, and I made my first website in 2001 for my school exam, but that was hardly any real programming. I also made some programs in Visual Basics, and that was a disaster. I made something for electronics while I was studying electronics, but I never really enjoyed programming, to be honest. Everything was still about matrices and sorting algorithms, and all projects were about economy or bookkeeping, basically an advanced Excel. And in Serbia back then, programming was not really a popular or even known as a career, at least not amongst people around me. What I did enjoy, however, was making things, both physical and also on my PC. I was always making something, either designing my own modular desk on the PC and then assembling it in real life, or just photoshopping some funny photos of my friends or whatever. I wrote a relatively successful blog, and I just enjoy starting with a blank page and making something that someone else might enjoy as well. So I used my PC mainly as a tool to make things, and even though I'm not that much of an artistic type, I do think of myself as a relatively creative person in terms of finding solutions to the problems and improving things around me. So even though I never enjoyed programming, to be honest, but since I loved computers, programming was somehow always around me, I guess. But what I realized is that it is making of things that actually drives me forward to learn new things. That was my motivation to learn SketchUp, Photoshop, or to learn Premiere Pro or PHP, or whatever I needed to learn to make the project I was working on. So, do you like making or improving things around you? Do you just do what you're asked to, or are you creative? So using the PC allowed me to be creative in very different ways, but I was also really curious about how things around me work. So little by little I became familiar with computer internals, learning a bunch of things about it. I got it from my father, I guess. He enjoyed opening appliances, radios and TVs to see how they work. I guess that is the typical engineer characteristic. We are always more interested in things than people as a general rule. So I would open all my car toys and try to improve the suspension or paint them in police colors or whatever. I also had a microscope and I would put everything under it just to see how things look like from very close up. And if I would get a good enough question, I would go to bed thinking about it, and I would wake up thinking about it as well. But being curious also allowed me to spend a lot of time figuring things out in programming as well, because what we programmers do is actually solve the problems all the time. Someone, your boss, your client, or even you have a problem, and by using some tools like programming languages, some libraries, and a bunch of if-else's, we make some automated solution to it. So we are constantly surrounded by problems, and by being curious and also a bit competitive, I guess, we can actually sit there for hours and analyze the problem, trying to really understand what the hell is going on and how things work and how we can improve them or fix them. And that is something a programmer has to be able to do. When you have 20 people on a project, and they want you to make, let's say, one very complex ordering form, and to be honest, none of them really understand what the actual rules are for that ordering form, you have to be curious enough, and I guess persistent, to really dig down in order to really understand what is that you should do. In majority of cases, you will not get everything perfectly explained. So you need to have that curiosity to keep asking questions so that you can rest in the evening knowing that you really understand the problem. So do you find yourself going to bed in the evening and just wondering about how and why is something happening around you? Are you curious? I worked in at least 10 companies so far, and before I started programming I noticed one thing, and that is that I was fairly easily replaceable. It took only a few days for a new guy to take my place, and that did bother me a bit, especially when I wanted to plan a bit longer in the future. And having a boss reducing my salary for 10% just to show me that he is the boss didn't help at all. And since I've been broke in majority of my life, there were things that I just had to ignore and continue working to pay my rent. But what finally tipped me over to programming was my landlord while I was studying. I think I told this story before, but while studying I had a landlord who took a week off from work to do some project on his own. He was a welder and I was helping him to make some fridge behind the house, and his boss came and begged him to come back to work. And he just told him to wait a few days. And to be honest, that was not an option in my hand. In my surrounding, when boss calls you, you go to work. But my landlord knew that he can earn his own bread, and he knew that what he is doing is not that easily to replace. So he had the freedom to say no. And that is where programming finally clicked for me. Luckily it was and still is under huge demand, so there is a lot of work for a good programmer, so we can choose a bit. And also having the entire world as your market over the internet is almost unheard of in a lot of professions. So when I wanted to, I took some freelance project on the side and bought some new toy, a PC or a camera or whatever. And it was hard to learn programming, no question about it. I remember when my girlfriend went to summer vacation with her friends and I couldn't afford to go with them. Instead I spent 12 days, my entire year's vacation, on learning the PHP for around 12 hours a day. My eyes were red every day, but I was determined that it was worth it. And while we're on the subject of independence, people say that money is not important. Well, not sure about that, to be honest. I was broke majority of my life. I never had my own room growing up. Hell, I didn't even have my own bed before I was 16. I started working in a local cafe and then I moved out. And I remember once we were students and we could not find like $1 to buy a small bag of ketchup to eat with tuna. I promised myself then that I will always have money for ketchup. And it is true, money does not solve all the problems, but it does solve a lot of them. But I always thought about those 10% salary deduction and how my boss bought him a new pair of glasses because he took 10% of 4 of our workers that month, and how honest he was about that. So being independent was my main guideline to choosing this career. What is your motivation? But what actually makes me enjoy doing it, particularly the web especially, is the drive to, well, to show off. As with all my projects I mentioned before, I would enjoy showing them to my friends. It's always great to hear people talk about something I was working on. Even a few months ago I got stopped on the street by people telling me how much my blog helped them and how they enjoyed reading it and were motivated by it, even though I stopped writing it years ago. You see, when you're a programmer, especially a freelancer, you're as good as your last project. You want your projects to be successful so that you can have first your regular client happy and come back, but also you want to have solutions behind you to show to the new clients. Try never to make some quick and dirty website because your client has a small budget or whatever. We are not just making code, we are making solutions. You want your product to be as good as possible, even though you're just one of 100 guys working on it. You want to be on the winning team regardless. And it is on you if the project fails, even though you can say that it's client's fault or wrong documentation or whatever. The project can fail, but you still have to be proud to show it to someone. The first website for Yukin Media was something that I worked on, and even though that first version was actually a failure and they switched to another platform, I can still be proud of all the complicated things that we were able to do for it. And that goes for pretty much every project I worked on. That is not limited to just programming. I try to do the same with pretty much everything. Photography, videography, being a father and a husband. I take huge pride in things I do. If we improve a little every day, after some time we can see the results of our improvement. And even these videos, for example, I try each video to be a bit better than the previous one. So programming is just a tool or a way of expression what you are doing. You're either that kind of person in real life or not. Of course you can change, ethics can change, and it changes with age, but I do get the same satisfaction with the picture I printed out, the website I just made, or with the motorcycle I've just washed. So, are you proud of your work? So from my personal experience, what I think was important for me to become a programmer was a desire to fix and improve things, being curious to learn new skills, and being motivated to do it. That got me started in programming, and enjoying the results of my work kept me a happy programmer. But I would say that is pretty much universal, not just programming related. I just happen to be interested in computers and I do enjoy programming a lot now, especially that I can see the practical use of my work. But in all my previous jobs, even in the car wash service, I would actually enjoy taking a dirty car or a dirty motorcycle and just clean it so that the results of my work are visible and maybe someone would enjoy what I do.